So picture a 2-1 loss in a fairly standard football match against a team from a lower division.
Right. I mean, it's a sports upset. It happens.
Exactly. On paper, it is just a standard, albeit really embarrassing upset. But instead of simply being annoyed, logging off, and, moving on with their weekend, one fan immediately goes online and types this. I have to read it. I guess I'll be reading Marcus Aurelius tonight. The months of April and May always seem to bring out my inner stoicism for some reason. Welcome to today's deep dive.
I mean, it is just an absolutely incredible reaction. You have a fan literally turning to the philosophical meditations of a 2nd century Roman emperor just to process the emotional damage.
Over a quarterfinal domestic cup exit. It's wild. So we are looking at the weekend of April 4th and 5th, 2026, and the sources on the table for you today are just a fascinating mix.
Yeah, we've got the clinical, very objective, official match reports from BBC Sport.
Right, and we are pairing those with the raw, completely unfiltered, incredibly volatile reactions from multiple Reddit fan communities. We're diving into the dedicated forums for Arsenal, Liverpool, and Manchester United, alongside the general Premier League subreddit.
Our mission today isn't to talk about, who kicked the ball where or the XG stats. We're exploring the psychological theater of sports fandom.
Spot on. We are going to dissect the stark contrast between the agonizing frustrations of a fan base witnessing a mid-season collapse and the pure, unadulterated celebratory joy of their rivals.
It's a massive emotional divide.
It really is, and I want to be crystal clear right at the top for you listening. This deep dive is a strictly impartial analysis of the sources provided. We are not taking sides at all. We are merely observing the incredible digital spaces and the emotions documented in them. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand why a fan is reaching for ancient philosophy, we first have to ground ourselves in the reality of what actually happened on the pitch.
Right, the BBC Sport report.
Exactly. It lays out the anatomy of a massive shock defeat. So, Arsenal, who are sitting comfortably at the top of the Premier League, traveled to St. Mary's Stadium to play Southampton in the FA Cup quarterfinals.
And just for context, for those who might not follow the intricacies of the English football pyramid, Southampton are currently 7th in the championship.
Which is the division immediately below the Premier League.
Right. So while Southampton are a professional, very historic club fighting for promotion, they are technically a minor league team compared to the financial and competitive juggernaut that is Arsenal right now. It is a total mismatch.
A profound mismatch. And, the BBC report emphasizes that Arsenal did not treat this lightly. Manager Mikel Arteta fielded a very strong senior starting lineup.
He didn't just throw the kids out there.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He started his captain, Martin Odegaard. He started high-profile signings like Kai Havertz, Ben White, and Gabriel Magalhaes. He put out a team designed to completely dominate and advance.
But the reality of the match goes entirely off script. Southampton strikes first. Ross Stewart opens the scoring in the 35th minute.
And you think, okay, wake-up call.
Right. And Arsenal actually manages to drag themselves level with a Viktor Gyokeres equaliser in the 68th minute. You'd think, okay, the giant has awoken, order is restored, right?
That's usually how these cup ties go, yeah.
But then, in the 85th minute, a substitute named Shea Charles scores the winner for Southampton, sending this championship side to their first FA Cup semi-final since 2021 and officially knocking Arsenal out.
And that 85th minute goal, that's the catalyst for the entire digital meltdown we see in the sources. But a football match doesn't happen in a vacuum, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
The BBC report explicitly highlights the contextual baggage that Arsenal brought into this stadium. This defeat occurred just weeks after Arsenal lost the Carabao Cup final, 2-0 to Manchester City.
And this is where we need to clearly define the stakes for you, because it really explains the severity of the reaction. In English football, there are multiple trophies available in a single season.
Right. You've got the Premier League, which is the weekly 9-month marathon, the Champions League, the Elite European Tournament.
And then you have 2 domestic knockout tournaments, the Carabao Cup, which is the League Cup, and the much older, more prestigious FA Cup. And just a few weeks ago, the media and the fans were seriously discussing the possibility of Arsenal winning the quadruple.
All 4 of those trophies in a single season.
Exactly. It is essentially the holy grail of club football.
And that quadruple narrative is just a fascinating psychological trap. When a team is performing exceptionally well on all 4 fronts, an incredibly heavy expectation begins to build up.
It's like you're carrying the weight of history.
Exactly. Structurally, The concept of a quadruple creates a much steeper emotional cliff for the fans to fall from. If your baseline expectation is absolute perfection, then literally anything less than total victory in every single competition feels like an abject, catastrophic failure.
Wait, I have to push back on that logic, though. If we look at the standings, Arsenal are still sitting at the top of the Premier League, 9 points clear of Manchester City.
Right, a huge lead.
And they have a massive Champions League quarter-final against Sporting CP coming up. If they are still the overwhelming favorites to win the biggest prize in the country, why does a loss in a domestic cup against a championship side trigger such an apocalyptic reaction? Shouldn't a 9-point league lead sort of insulate the fan base from this kind of panic?
Well, rationally, yes, a 9-point lead should offer immense comfort. But sports fandom, particularly in the echo chambers of online forums, is almost never governed by rationality.
That's an understatement.
It is governed by momentum and perception. When a team suffers back-to-back cup defeats, first losing a final at Wembley and then losing to a lower division team, it punctures their aura of invincibility. It introduces this psychological poison of doubt.
You are talking about the physical weight of expectation.
Exactly. In professional sports, momentum is a tangible force. When a team forgets how to lose, every pass is crisp, every decision is instinctual. But the moment a team loses consecutive high-stakes matches, the environment shifts completely.
The ball suddenly feels a little heavier.
The crowd murmurs with anxiety instead of cheering with anticipation. The players start overthinking simple actions. So the loss to Southampton wasn't just about exiting the FA Cup. It was a signal to the fan base that the structural integrity of their entire season might actually be compromised.
And there is a massive controversy highlighted in the sources that just pours gasoline on this anxiety. The timing of this loss is crucial. It happened immediately following an international break.
Oh, the injury controversy.
Yes. The sources detail how Arsenal apparently pulled 11 of their players out of national team duties, claiming various minor injuries. The widespread perception across all forums, among both rivals and Arsenal's own supporters, mind you, was that these injuries were largely diplomatic.
Right, they were seen as a strategic, perhaps cynical move by Arteta to rest his star players for this exact, highly congested run of domestic fixtures.
Exactly. And that perceived cynicism is a critical component of the fallout here.
Because by withdrawing 11 players from international duty, a club essentially makes a statement of extreme prioritization. They are telling the world, we are protecting our assets because our club ambitions are paramount.
Right. They are basically saying, we have a quadruple to win. We can't risk Martin Odegaard playing a meaningless friendly for Norway.
Which is a massive gamble psychologically. Because you make that cynical move, prioritize rest, feel a rested senior team against a lower division opponent, and still lose, the failure is magnified tenfold.
It introduces a deep sense of hubris.
Right. Exactly. It makes the defeat look not just like an unlucky day at the office, but like poetic justice for trying to game the football calendar.
A rival fan on the Liverpool forum explicitly zeroes in on this. They wrote, "No wonder Arsenal got put out. They've played all their players that were injured during international duty." You can practically hear the glee in that comment.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the flip side of this psychological coin. To truly understand the gravity of this Arsenal collapse, we can't just look at their own grief. We have to look at the people who are treating this 2-1 result like a national holiday. We need to talk about the art of the hate watch.
The hate watch. I love that term. It is explicitly used in the Our Manchester United thread, and it perfectly encapsulates a very specific, very modern mode of sports consumption.
It really does.
One Manchester United user proudly posted, "Them and Liverpool getting violated has absolutely made my weekend. Hate watch successful."
Hate watch successful. That is such a revealing phrase. We are looking deep into the Our Manchester United and our Liverpool FC subreddits, and the joy cascading through those threads is intoxicating for them. They are reveling in Arsenal's misery. But why does the human brain find so much joy in someone else's disaster?
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of schadenfreude within a tribal system. The joy of the hate watch often spikes when a fan's own team isn't delivering the desired dopamine hits.
So they look elsewhere for it.
Exactly. For example, in the sources, we see a Liverpool fan lamenting that they have to, quote, watch slot football till the summer.
For those who aren't steeped in Premier League managerial lore, that is a reference to Arne Slot, the manager of Liverpool. That comment implies that the current style of play under Slot is perceived by some fans as tedious or uninspiring, like a transitional period they just have to endure.
Precisely. So if your own team is locked in a boring transitional phase, or if your team is just having a mediocre season, your primary source of football-related joy is essentially severed. You can't celebrate your own victories.
So the brain seeks a substitute.
Right. Tearing down a highly successful, highly visible rival becomes an immensely therapeutic replacement. The psychological stakes of the hate watch are actually quite low for the viewer because their team isn't playing, so they can't lose.
Yeah.
But the emotional payout of seeing a rival stumble is enormous.
You know, I think of it like the dynamics of a high school graduation. Imagine you are sitting there in the audience, your own grades are fine, maybe perfectly average, nothing to celebrate, nothing to mourn.
Just coasting.
Right. But then the overly confident valedictorian, the person who has been boasting about getting into every Ivy League school, trips and falls face first while walking up the stairs to get their diploma.
Oh, that's brutal.
But the joy you feel in that moment has absolutely nothing to do with your own academic success. It is entirely derived from the sudden public vulnerability of someone you perceive as arrogant. It is the democratization of failure.
That is a highly accurate analogy, particularly regarding the perception of arrogance. And, the rival fans in these Reddit threads are incredibly creative in how they administer this mockery. They don't just say, Arsenal lost.
No, they go so much further.
They engage in what we could call linguistic engineering. They invent specific terminology to instantly meme the situation, targeting the very specific ambitions that Arsenal previously held.
The terminology in these threads is artful. It really is. The rival fans immediately started churning out monikers. We see them repeatedly using the term quad bottlers.
Which is clever on its own.
But the masterpiece, the one that was capitalized for maximum visual impact, was the Bowo treble. They took the word treble, or quadruple, smashed it into the word bottle, which is English football slang for choking under pressure, and created a brand new noun to define Arsenal's season.
And we also see a Liverpool fan referring to them as the English version of Bayer Leverkusen.
Ooh, explain that one, because that requires a bit of historical football literacy to fully appreciate the cruelty.
It really does. So Bayer Leverkusen is a German club that famously suffered a catastrophic collapse in the 2001-2002 season. They were on track to win a treble the league, the Domestic Cup, and the Champions League.
Okay, high stakes.
Exactly. And within a span of a few weeks, they collapsed in all three competitions, finishing as runners-up in every single one. The media literally dubbed them Bayer Leverkusen.
Oh, wow. So by applying that 24-year-old moniker to Arsenal in 2026, the Liverpool fan is essentially prophesying total doom. They aren't just mocking the FA Cup loss. They're suggesting that this is the beginning of an identical historic collapse across all remaining competitions.
By creating and deploying these terms, Bo Truppel, Leverkusen, these rival communities are developing a shared cultural shorthand. A Manchester United fan and a Liverpool fan typically despise each other. Their rivalry is historically very bitter.
Yeah, they do not get along.
But in this specific digital space, on this specific weekend, they are bonded by a common language of mockery directed at a third party. They are united in their hate watch.
And what's wild is how granular this hate watch gets. They aren't just looking at the final scoreline. They are hunting for highly specific micro moments of failure within the 90 minutes to fuel their joy.
Oh, the Martinelli moment.
Yes. In the Manchester United forum, one fan wrote, "The second goal was enjoyable, and Martinelli pushing the ref was even better." They are isolating a moment where Gabriel Martinelli, an Arsenal forward, physically loses his composure with the referee. Why does that specific moment of a player losing his temper bring a rival fan more joy than the actual goal itself?
Because a goal can be chalked up to bad luck, right? A deflection or a momentary lapse in physical concentration. But a player visibly losing their temper, pushing an official, that validates a much deeper, more damaging narrative.
It proves something fundamental to them.
Exactly. It confirms the rival fan's suspicion that the team is mentally fragile. The rival fan desperately wants to believe that Arsenal lacks the psychological fortitude of a true champion. So watching Martinelli crack under pressure is empirical evidence that supports their bias.
And this intense desire to prove Arsenal's fragility is heavily fueled by past statements from the Arsenal camp itself. The algorithm of sports hatred demands justification, and rival fans find it by weaponizing perceived arrogance. There is a brilliant example of this in the general Premier League subreddit. A rival fan digs up a quote from Piers Morgan.
Right. Piers Morgan is a broadcaster and one of the most vocal, heavily polarized, and visible celebrity Arsenal supporters in the media landscape.
Exactly. And the quote the fan pulls up is just stunning in its confidence. The fan posts, "I'm not claiming we have the best starting XI ever. I'm saying our 25-man PL squad is man for man the strongest in world club football history."
That is quite the claim.
That is a direct quote from Piers Morgan. And the rival fan simply juxtaposes that staggering claim of having the strongest squad in world club football history against the reality of losing 2-1 to the 7th place team in the championship.
It is the ultimate digital judo move. You use the opponent's own momentum, their own grandiosity against them. When a fan base or its prominent figures declare themselves historically great before securing the actual trophies, they build the very scaffold from which rivals will eventually hang them.
Wow. We also see Manchester United fans doing something similar, but from a defensive posture. In their forum, they aren't just mocking Arsenal, they're actively protecting their own historical legacy.
The combined XI debate.
Yes, a user posts, people were unironically doing combined XI. Not one Arsenal player gets in, and that should have been common knowledge from the start, lol.
So a combined XI is a popular format for internet sports debates. Fans take two different teams, often from entirely different eras, and try to merge them into a single hypothetical starting lineup of the absolute best 11 players.
Right. And Manchester United fans are fiercely protective of their 2008 squad, a team that genuinely won the Premier League and the Champions League. Before this Arsenal collapse, pundits and fans were evidently having debates about whether current Arsenal players were better than those 2008 Manchester United legends.
Which borders on sacrilege for a United fan.
Absolutely. So now that Arsenal has stumbled against Southampton, the United fans are using this failure to retroactively shut down that debate. They are using Arsenal's current misery to reinforce the unassailable greatness of their own past.
Which really highlights how these digital forums operate. The rival subreddits are essentially endless, self-sustaining digital victory parades. They are ecosystems built entirely on memes, schadenfreude, and the recycling of old quotes. The mood is light, cruel, and highly entertaining for the participants.
But if we cross the digital street, if we leave the carnival atmosphere of the rival hate watch and step inside the Gunner subreddit, the atmosphere is suffocating. It is dark. The sources reveal a fascinating, immensely complex psychological study of grief, panic, and what we might even call generational trauma.
In the context of sports fandom, generational trauma is a highly applicable concept. We have to remember the deep historical context of this specific club. Arsenal has not won the Premier League since 2004.
Wow, over 20 years.
They have not won the Champions League, well, ever. For over 2 decades, this fan base has endured periods of near misses, slow declines, and false dawns. There is a deeply embedded neurological pathway in this fan base that associates the months of April and May with structural collapse.
Let's look at how that trauma manifests in the immediate aftermath of the final whistle. The anger directed at the manager, Mikel Arteta, is intense and incredibly swift. Again, I have to remind you, this manager has them 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League. Yet in this specific thread, patience has just evaporated. One fan brutally dubs Arteta the Spanish Brendan Rodgers.
That is a highly specific, very surgical insult. Brendan Rodgers is a manager who famously led Liverpool to the brink of a Premier League title in the 2013-2014 season, playing thrilling, attacking football, only to suffer a catastrophic collapse in the final weeks.
So it's synonymous with choking.
Right. He is often characterized by rival fans as someone who talks a very good philosophical game, but ultimately fails to cross the finish line when the pressure is absolute. Calling Arteta the Spanish Brendan Rodgers is an accusation of superficiality. It implies that Arteta's system is aesthetically pleasing, but fundamentally hollow when actual trophies are on the line.
Another fan in that same Gunners thread zeroes in on the financial aspect, lamenting that £1 billion has been spent on this squad over the last few years just for them to, quote, bottle at every opportunity.
That mention of the £1 billion expenditure marks a massive shift in the psychological expectations of the fan base. For many years in the 2010s, Arsenal operated under severe financial constraints while paying off a new stadium.
They were the plucky underdogs trying to do it the right way.
Exactly. They were viewed, somewhat romantically, as purists fighting against financially doped rivals. But that era is completely over. Arsenal is now a financial superpower. When you spend £1 billion, you strip away the underdog narrative.
The expectations change completely.
The fans no longer view near misses as valiant efforts. They view them as an unacceptable lack of return on a massive financial investment. The grace period is gone.
But what I found most arresting in these Reddit sources is how this lack of grace affects fans of different ages. The threads capture a very real generational divide in how sports pain is processed. There is a quote from an 18-year-old Arsenal fan that is just pure, unadulterated anguish. They type, in all caps, 14 years, 14 fucking years I've been supporting the club. I'm 18 and I've basically been through this torture my entire life. Should have been used to it by now.
Think about the timeline of that 18-year-old's life. If they started consciously supporting the team around the age of 4, their entire cognitive experience of Arsenal Football Club has been defined by the post-2004 drought.
They literally don't know what it feels like to win the league.
Exactly. For them, the narrative of bottling isn't a cruel meme invented by Manchester United fans. It is their genuine, lived reality. Every April, they've watched their team stumble. They have no memory of absolute triumph to fall back on.
But immediately below that comment, an older fan responds, someone who's been around much longer. And their response is chilling in a completely different way. The older fan writes, "Almost better. I was 8 when we went invincible. I thought we were on easy streak. It's the hope that kills you."
It's the hope that kills you. That phrase is the ultimate mantra of the veteran, scarred sports fan. The older fan is referring to the 2003-2004 Invincibles season, where Arsenal won the league without losing a single game.
Which is still an incredible achievement.
Unprecedented in modern times. That 8-year-old child witnessed a level of perfection that had never been seen in modern English football. Their baseline expectation was set at immortal, and then they had to endure 22 years of slow, agonizing regression to the mean. The older fan has developed thick emotional calluses, whereas the 18-year-old is still experiencing the trauma as raw, exposed nerve endings.
Watching these fans try to apply a tourniquet to those exposed nerves is fascinating. The sources show a wide spectrum of psychological coping mechanisms being deployed in real time. The first line of defense seems to be rationalization. Fans try to construct a logical wall to hide behind. You see comments popping up saying things like, 2 games where we deliberately rotated and rested a lot of key players, or the league is all that matters in my eyes.
Rationalization is a textbook defense mechanism. It is the ego's way of minimizing the perceived threat to its happiness. If a fan can convince themselves that the club didn't really try to win the FA Cup, or that the FA Cup is fundamentally unimportant compared to the Premier League, then the sting of losing to Southampton is neutralized.
It's a way of saying, you didn't beat us, we chose not to participate.
Yeah.
But the ecosystem of a Reddit thread doesn't allow that delusion to survive for long. Other Arsenal fans immediately turn on the rationalizers. They tear down that logical wall, aggressively pointing out that Arteta actually didn't rest that many key players against Manchester City in the Carabao Cup final, and that fielding a spine of Odegaard, Havertz, and White against a championship team is the exact opposite of a weak lineup. The facts on the ground just do not support the rationalization. And here is where it gets really interesting. When logic fails, when rationalization is debunked by your own peers, the human brain has to find another escape hatch. And for one fan, that escape hatch was Rome, circa 170 AD.
The invitation of Marcus Aurelius.
I cannot stop thinking about this detail. The fan posts, "Guess I'll be reading Marcus Aurelius tonight," and then a minute later follows up with, "The month of April and May always seem to bring out my inner stoicism for some reason."
It is an incredible display of self-awareness, masking deep pain. Stoicism, particularly as taught by Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, revolves around a central tenet. You cannot control the external events of the world. You can only control your internal reaction to them.
Which is the absolute perfect philosophy for a modern sports consumer. Think about it. As a fan sitting on your couch or in the stands, you have 0% physical control over the outcome of a match. You are emotionally tethered to the actions of 11 young men kicking a synthetic sphere on a patch of grass hundreds of miles away. You are completely powerless.
Exactly. When you strip away the jerseys and the tribalism, sports fandom is essentially an exercise in voluntarily subjecting yourself to massive, uncontrollable emotional variance.
A roller coaster you can't steer.
Right. And when the variance swings negatively, when your billion-pound squad loses to a second-tier team, stoicism offers a lifeboat. It instructs the fan to detach, to accept the chaos of the universe, and to recognize that their anger over a football match is entirely self-inflicted.
You literally have to train your brain like an ancient warrior philosopher just to survive the FA Cup quarterfinals. That is the peak of modern entertainment consumption. But the truth is, most fans cannot maintain that level of stoic detachment. As much as they try to rise above it, they inevitably get dragged back down into the weeds. They aren't just reacting to the fact that the score was 2-1, they are obsessively, painfully analyzing the specific micro-events on the pitch that caused that 2-1 reality. Which brings us to the tactical post-mortem and the intense, often brutal scrutiny of individual players.
When a shock defeat of this magnitude occurs, the collective psyche of a fan base demands a villain.
They need someone to blame.
The explanation that Southampton simply played a better game on the day is psychologically unsatisfying. It's too passive. The fans need to identify specific, curable flaws. They look for individual human errors and systemic tactical failures that can be blamed, isolated, and theoretically fixed.
And in this match, defender Ben White becomes a primary target for the fan base's wrath. The BBC Sport report provides the clinical breakdown of why. They note that for Southampton's opening goal, White, quote, misjudged the flight of James Bree's delivery, which allowed Ross Stewart to slip in and score. The Arsenal fans on Reddit seize on this error and they are just merciless. One fan dryly comments, "Now I know why Ben White doesn't watch football stress-free."
That comment is a brilliant, highly contextual piece of internet snark. Ben White previously gave an interview that went quite viral, where he openly admitted that he doesn't really watch football matches in his spare time.
Yeah.
He treats it purely as his profession.
He just clocks in and clocks out.
Exactly. And when Arsenal is winning and White is playing flawlessly, the fan base views that, quote, as evidence of his cool, detached, elite mentality. He's an ice-cold professional who does his job brilliantly.
But the moment he misjudges the flight of a ball against a championship striker,
the narrative completely inverts. That exact same quote is weaponized against him. Suddenly his detachment isn't cool, it's proof of a fundamental lack of passion. The fans use it as evidence that he doesn't care enough about the shirt, that he lacks the obsessive dedication required to win a quadruple. The double-edged sword of player media quotes is incredibly sharp.
And the scrutiny isn't confined to the defense either. The attackers are facing a brutal internal audit from the fans. There is incredibly harsh criticism directed at Gabriel Martinelli and Gabriel Jesus. The frustration in the Argunners thread boils over to the point where fans are demanding these players be, quote, offloaded in the summer, sell them, get rid of them. And one fan points out a contradiction that seems to be driving them absolutely insane. They write, "I wonder why our attackers look so good on international duty but turn shit in an Arsenal shirt."
This is a profound source of cognitive dissonance for a football fan. When a player underperforms consistently, the easiest conclusion is that they simply aren't talented enough. But when a player goes away on international duty and performs brilliantly for Brazil and then returns to North London and looks lost, the lack of talent argument evaporates.
Right. If they're good for Brazil, they obviously still possess the physical ability.
Exactly. Which means the variable causing the failure isn't the player's intrinsic ability, it is the environment. It implies that either the club's culture is toxic or the manager's tactical system is actively stifling the talent. And in the Arsenal forums, this specific observation leads directly to a scathing critique of Arteta's entire tactical philosophy.
The tactical contrast highlighted in these sources is fascinating. Let's look at how the two managers are perceived after these 90 minutes. The Arsenal fans are tearing Arteta's system apart. They are referring to his tactics as a pub brand of football. They call it slow, lethargic, and risk-averse. One user deploys an incredible visual metaphor, complaining about, quote, the horseshoe of sadness followed by a cross from either flank.
The horseshoe of sadness. It is a spectacularly evocative phrase that perfectly describes a very specific, highly frustrating style of modern possession football.
Okay, explain the geometry of the horseshoe for the listener. Why is it sad?
Well, when a team like Arsenal plays a heavy underdog like Southampton, the underdog will usually pack all their defensive players deep inside their own penalty area. To break that down, you need rapid, incisive passes through the middle, or players willing to take huge risks to beat a man one-on-one.
You have to force the issue.
Right. If a team lacks that risk appetite, they end up just passing the ball in a giant U-shaped horseshoe around the perimeter of the opponent's defense. They pass from the left wing, back out to the midfield, over to the right wing, and back again.
So they have absolute control of the ball, but they are doing absolutely no damage. They are just pacing around the perimeter fence.
Precisely. It creates a massive statistical illusion. The team looks dominant because they never lose the ball, but they rarely penetrate the most dangerous areas of the pitch. And the BBC stats from this match validate that horseshoe feeling perfectly. Arsenal commanded 63.7% of the possession. They registered 23 total shots, yet they only managed to score one single goal. It was a sterile, blunt force dominance.
And conversely, you look at the BBC coverage of Southampton's manager, Tonda Eckert. The pundits are practically throwing roses at his feet. Alan Shearer and Micah Richards, two very prominent voices on BBC One, are raving about his setup.
Because Eckert's strategy was the absolute antithesis of the horseshoe. The BBC report notes that Southampton's tactical directive was simple: get the ball forward quickly and behind the Arsenal defense.
Just bypass the midfield completely.
Exactly. Eckert recognized that trying to outpass Arsenal would be suicide. So he ceded control. Southampton only had 36.3% possession. But when they did get the ball, they were utterly direct. They didn't pass sideways. They launched it forward, utilized the physical energy of their home crowd, and created absolute chaos for Arsenal's defenders.
But I want to pause on this tactical analysis for a moment. Is it purely a tactical failure on Arteta's part? Did efforts simply outchess him? Or is there a deeper psychological block happening here? Because Micah Richards, the former Manchester City defender turned pundit, made a very pointed observation on the BBC broadcast. He didn't focus on the passing angles. He said, and I quote, "The most disappointing thing for me was watching them and their attitude. For them to turn up the way they did today, I thought was very poor."
This raises a fundamental question about elite sports. Where does the tactical blueprint end? And where does human mentality begin? They are deeply intertwined. When a superior team, stacked with international stars, employs a slow, methodical, low-risk possession style against an inferior opponent, it can very easily breed a subconscious complacency.
You think you've already won before you step on the pitch.
Right. The players start to feel that because they control the ball, the victory is inevitable.
They expect the opponent to eventually just tire out and surrender.
Exactly. But if that underdog, in this case, Southampton, is highly motivated and executes a hyper-aggressive direct plan, it shocks the system. Suddenly, the Arsenal defenders aren't just passing the ball leisurely around the back. They are in a physical sprint against a striker who is treating the match like it's the World Cup final.
A total mismatch in intensity.
It causes a mental short circuit. A team that expects a chess match suddenly finds themselves in a bar fight, and their attitude, as Micah Richards noted, fails to adjust to the violence of the situation.
And the historical context of the day only amplified Southampton's aggression. The BBC points out a brilliant little detail. Southampton are wearing a specific yellow kit this season to commemorate the 50th anniversary of their 1976 FA Cup victory. The stadium was rocking. The fans were chanting about returning to Wembley. When you combine that tidal wave of historical momentum and underdog energy against a team whose attitude is perceived as poor, a shock result suddenly feels much less shocking.
It becomes a perfect storm. The tactical mismatch sterile possession versus chaotic directness combines with the psychological mismatch of complacency versus historical motivation.
So we have dissected the tactical failure, the psychological collapse, and the historical momentum on the pitch. But the real meat of this deep dive, the thing that makes this April 2026 weekend so fascinating, is what happens after the whistle. We need to look at the medium through which we are consuming these narratives. We have to ask how the social media architecture of these Reddit forums fundamentally alters the reality of the sport itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see a massive paradigm shift. We are no longer simply observing a physical competition. We are actively participating in a digital amplification machine. Platforms like Reddit do not merely reflect the emotions of the fans, they engineer and amplify them.
Let's trace how this ecosystem shapes the narrative. We've established the two distinct tones in our sources. On one side, the mocking, meme-heavy, dopamine-fueled hate watch of the Manchester United and Liverpool forums. On the other, the defensive, furious Marcus Aurelius quoting despair of the Arsenal forum. How does the structure of social media dictate this behavior?
Consider the lifespan and the severity of a defeat before the digital age. Imagine it is 1996. Arsenal loses 2-1 to Southampton in the Cup. What happens? An Arsenal fan watches it on television, feels incredibly angry, goes to the local pub, grumbles about the manager with a few friends, maybe reads a scathing column in the Sunday newspaper, and by Monday morning, the acute pain is largely dissipated.
The humiliation is localized.
Yes, it is contained within a small physical and social geography.
The blast radius of the loss is basically limited to who you interact with in person.
Exactly. But in 2026, the structure of the internet eradicates those boundaries. A 2-to-1 loss is no longer a localized event. It is a globally broadcast opportunity for mockery. And crucially, the engagement algorithms that power these platforms actively reward extreme reactions. Nuance does not go viral. Anger, schadenfreude, and humiliation do.
So the platform itself is encouraging the rival fans to be as cruel as possible.
Yes, the algorithmic architecture means that rival fans don't just log on and say, "I am glad Arsenal lost." The platform incentivizes them to isolate and weaponize micro-failures. They don't just discuss the score. They clip a 5-second video of Martinelli pushing the referee. They clip Ben White misjudging the ball. They pair those clips with old Piers Morgan
Well,
quotes.
manufacture content out of the
They
misery.
create high-definition, highly shareable packages of humiliation and push them into the digital feeds of millions of people.
It makes it literally impossible for the losing fans to quietly mourn. They can't just log off, because the moment they open any app, the algorithm serves them their own team's failure, repackaged as comedy by their enemies.
And this creates a closed, inescapable loop of profound toxicity. Let's trace the mechanics of this loop based on the sources. Step 1. Arsenal is winning. During this period, prominent voices like Piers Morgan declare them the greatest squad in history. This establishes a baseline of perceived arrogance.
Which makes them a target.
Step 2. Arsenal loses. The rival fans, feeling justified by that previous arrogance, unleash a disproportionate, algorithmically enhanced wave of cruelty. The Bautruppel memes, the Neverkusen comparisons.
Which triggers step 3. The Arsenal fans, bombarded by this global mockery, become hyper-defensive. The pressure cooker environment forces them into extreme reactions. They can't just be mildly disappointed. The sheer volume of external mockery demands they either match that energy by violently turning on their own manager, calling him the Spanish Brendan Rodgers, or they must completely dissociate from reality by pretending to be ancient Stoic philosophers.
It is an arms race of emotional extremes. And the most startling revelation in these sources is just how vital this toxicity has become to the modern fan experience.
Yeah,
The joy derived from this cycle is incredibly potent.
it really is.
We return to that quote from the Liverpool fan. They explicitly stated that they were having a generally bad day in their real life, but logging online and watching Arsenal's digital collapse, quote, made my day that bit better.
I really want you to stop and think about the implications of that quote. A rival's failure is being consumed as a digital mood-altering substance. The fan didn't derive joy from watching beautiful football. They didn't watch their own team win. They simply ingested the digital suffering of a rival fan base, and it was enough to physiologically fix a bad mood. It is digital comfort food.
The currency of these forums has fundamentally shifted. They are no longer places for nuanced tactical analysis of a 4-3-3 formation. The currency is emotional leverage. The invention of the word Bautruppel isn't a critique of Arsenal's midfield spacing. It is a blunt, linguistic weapon designed to inflict maximum emotional damage on one group while extracting maximum comedic value for another.
And based on the sheer volume of engagement in these threads, that weapon is highly effective. So let's step back and look at the massive terrain we have covered today. We started with the clinical facts. Arsenal chasing a historic quadruple, suffering a 2-to-1 collapse against a championship side, compounding the misery of a recent League Cup final loss.
We examine the anatomy of that failure, analyzing how the sterile possession of the horseshoe of sadness was dismantled by a highly motivated direct underdog, raising serious questions about the mental fragility of an elite squad.
We watched how that physical failure on the pitch was instantly processed by the internet. We saw rival fans invent new terminology, the BOT triple, to surgically target Arsenal's shattered ambitions, weaponizing past arrogance to fuel their hate watch. And we contrasted that gleeful schadenfreude with the dark, agonizing grief of the Arsenal forums, where fans swung wildly between demanding their billion-pound squad be dismantled and retreating into the emotional numbness of Roman stoicism just to survive the weekend. So what does this all mean? I want you, the listener, to pause and reflect on your own passions. Think about the things you are deeply invested in. It doesn't even have to be professional sports. It could be politics, corporate rivalries, the tech world, or even the gaming community. How much of your joy in those spaces genuinely comes from the success and the beauty of the thing you claim to love? And if you are being brutally honest with yourself, how much of your daily engagement is secretly derived from watching your competitors stumble? Are you tending to the health of your own garden, or are you just sitting on your porch, scrolling on your phone, waiting for your neighbor's house to catch fire?
And that leads us to a final, rather unsettling question to mull over as we conclude. We have seen today How social media echo chambers do not just reflect our reactions. They engineer, amplify, and weaponize our sports-related pain and joy to extreme, almost toxic degrees. If the primary emotional payout for a fan is now found in the creation of cruel memes, the hate watch, and the algorithmic distribution of a rival's misery, are we actually enjoying the sport itself anymore? Could it be that the 90 minutes of physical football played on the grass has merely become the raw material, the crude oil, that we refine to fuel the real competition taking place on our screens?
The beautiful game reduced to nothing more than a muddy diagnostic tool for our own digital madness. That is a heavy but incredibly necessary thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you are fed online. Remember to protect your peace, and we will catch you on the next one.